I'm Stephen Greenhut, Director of the Free City Center of the Pacific Research Institute, and we're here with Todd Leone looking at the R Street corridor, a area south of downtown Sacramento that's revived itself and is quite a stunning area. Uh, Okay, Todd, this area it started out, it was a railroad corridor of some sort. And why don't you give me a little bit about the history of R Street?
Sure. So the R Street corridor was the first industrial railroad corridor in the western United States. It was created to take miners who were here for the gold rush from the Sacramento River all the way up to the Folsom Hills. Big fight in the 1980s between neighbors and developers. And in the mid 1990s, there was a big council meeting, and the council, after 10 years of fighting back and forth, decided to go with a mixed-use neighborhood plan for the corridor. So the R Street corridor runs from 3rd Street all the way down to 29th Street. From Q to S, it's a 2-block kind of wide corridor that runs about 30 blocks. So now the implementation of the plan didn't go real quick. There was a number of infrastructure issues that needed to be addressed for development to occur. So CADA, which has a section of redevelopment area in the middle of that corridor, and we're able to procure money over time, and starting in about 2006 to about 2015, and we addressed the major infrastructure issue, which was the streetscape. But that really set the stage for private development to come in and utilize that streetscape, those streetscape improvements, to build the type of housing, the type of mixed-use commercial uses that was envisioned back in the mid-90s. But we're getting there. I'd say we're about halfway done in the improvements and the redevelopment we'd like to see that was envisioned for the R Street corridor plan.
Now we're standing in front of Fox and Goose, which has been here for a long time. It's a British
over 40
pub.
years.
Yeah, and when I mention R Street corridor, people even around here don't seem to know much about it. But I say Fox and Goose, and they know what that is. So what's the significance of this business on sparking redevelopment around it?
Sure. So the Fox and Goose was one of the first kind of rehab uses of an old industrial warehouse building. This used to be the Fuller Paint building. On the back side, there was actually a rail spur that went in the back and loaded paint supplies and other things in and out of the building. And then here later on, you'd have these a dock that would come in and utilize the automobile kind of truck uses. The Dalton family, who ran the Fox and Goose for about 40 years, leased the site, leased the building here, created the Fox and Goose, and became a breakfast and lunch institution from the very beginning. He was the owner of the building at the time. He leased out the other half of the building from the Fox and Goose to artists. Okay. So they supported one of the first artist kind of groups and studios here in Sacramento. And so that kind of started kind of the art component of the R Street corridor, which is kind of known for today. This building is, I'd say about 80 years old. It's a brick building, which is pretty typical of the type of buildings that were built before the R Street corridor started to redevelop. You see basic industrial kind of aesthetics, but with a modern touch to it. And so that's the kind of urban design that we want to see with newer buildings that are built along the corridor.
Are there design standards?
There are for the city, but generally I think the city has changed over time, the standards and for not only the R Street corridor, but the central city. But when folks come in and they go through design review, you usually get comments to developers about trying to keep the industrial aesthetic of the corridor and try to fit in with what the rest of the corridor has been built out as, both historically and new.
We were talking, Todd, earlier about the setup, the kind of the bureaucratic setup of CADA. What is it, Capital Area Development Association? Could you just briefly explain what that is and how the administration of the corridor works? Yeah.
Sure. So CADA was created as a joint powers authority between the city and the state, and its main purpose was to implement what's called the Capital Area Plan, which is a plan that was created to develop blighted properties that the state owned, had acquired during the 1950s and early 1960s to develop a state office campus. That plan to build a state office campus changed, and they had a number of properties, including residential properties, that were run down and weren't being properly managed by the state. And so they created CADA to help both maintain those properties and also build out the Capital Area Plan, which was a mixed-use plan to develop residential properties, mixed-use properties on state-owned land. And so we, CADA, were looked to when the R Street Corridor Plan was created to help manage and develop a portion of the corridor for redevelopment purposes. And so in 2002, our boundaries are expanded to include the central section of the R Street Corridor, and we began trying to see what we could do to develop this section. And the main component was trying to develop infrastructure improvements that would support private development. We weren't going to go out and purchase property at the time, but what we could do is look for grants and other sources of funding to build sidewalks that didn't exist, to help build amenities for pedestrians and for bicyclists, and also basic utility infrastructure as well. So we did a number of water and drainage improvements as well. And those were really important because those could be really high cost items for developers that can make the difference, at least at the time, between looking to develop a property and making it infeasible. And so we've spent a number of funds building basic infrastructure for the corridor.
How did this area survive the wrecking ball?
Well, part of it is I think it wasn't close enough to the central business district to really be viewed by developers as an opportunity area. I think once the central business district kind of was built out for the most part, you know, and people saw the opportunities here on R Street as being something that was a feasible thing to look at, I think that's when you started to get some of the attention. Now, that's not to say when the R Street Corridor first started, as I mentioned earlier, there were a number of properties, especially in the west end and a little further down towards 16th Street, where a number of the really well-known developers in the city of Sacramento looked to industrial properties to build high-rise office buildings, primarily to be leased to the state.
Right.
But again, the neighborhoods in and around the R Street Corridor were very concerned about how those office buildings, their height, their massing, would impact their neighborhoods and their way of life. You know, very quiet, quaint kind of neighborhoods, 2 or 3 stories at the most in this area. And so really there are two, I think, urban planning kind of moments in the city of Sacramento that really pushed preservation forward in terms of being something that's of value to the city of Sacramento. One was the Alhambra Theater, and when it was demolished over on Alhambra Boulevard, that was a real moment for the city of Sacramento and losing something that was a historic feature and very important to the community. The other one was here on the R Street Corridor, where preserving a way of life, a culture of a neighborhood or neighborhoods was seen as more important than building out office buildings and expanding the central business district. So it really galvanized the communities. You started to see more communities come together to fight these type of developments. And so as a flashpoint for community organization and really utilizing their council members and utilizing their political power as a community, that was a really important point in the central city, in the city of Sacramento. So R Street corridors look back historically as one of those moments where neighborhood organizations utilize their organizational power to influence development here in the city of Sacramento.
Yeah, so Todd, one of the keys from what I've been reading to redevelop areas is to create housing, because if you have housing, you've got people who frequent the restaurants, and it doesn't just turn into a vacant area, you know, most of the day. So you wanted to point out new housing development over here, and explain to me how housing has, you know, how you've thought about housing in terms of this corridor.
So the housing component is actually the primary feature of the R Street Corridor Plan and the vision for R Street. Unfortunately, it's really hard to build housing in the city of Sacramento for a number of economic reasons. So it's only just been recently that the city has seen a number of private development come into the central city on its own without subsidy and be built. That only occurred in the last 8 to 10 years. Prior, you needed some sort of city subsidy to help you out. So it's taken a while for us to get there. So the R Street Corridor, in its kind of renewal and redevelopment at its beginning, was mostly commercial oriented. So we saw a number of commercial ventures and reuse of buildings for restaurants and offices and other type of retail uses. So one of the things that we wanted to see was more housing. So how do we do that? Well, fortunately, CATA and the state had a property on our street, uh, which was seen as an opportunity and a catalyst project. And so behind me here is the Warehouse Artist Lofts building. It was an old storage warehouse, the main old warehouse here with the brick facade in the middle. Um, and it was used as one of the first fireproof warehouses in the city of Sacramento, built the turn of the 20th century. And it's a very stout building, and we saw it as an opportunity similar to you see in other major cities turning their warehouse buildings into lofts. And so we worked on trying to develop and find a developer to help us build this building for over 15 years and couldn't find the economics and the subsidies to make it work. Um, Around 2011, our developer at the time kind of threw up his arms and said, I can't make this work. You're going to have to maybe find affordable housing money to build this. And so we partnered, found a partner in CFY Development who we sold the property to. They developed it as an affordable housing artist lofts building. And so there are 116 units here, 86 of which are affordable. And there are almost 100% of the occupants in this building are artists who have some sort of artistic endeavor that they do either on the side or full time. And so that that really planted a flag in terms of the artist community here in Sacramento and on the R Street corridor. We had artists, galleries, and lofts and other things throughout the corridor over time, but this really solidified the art component of the R Street culture and the R Street developments that have come and are coming down the corridor.
And they left the old windows. That's
Yeah, that was a historic feature. So they received historic tax credits as part of the project, and as part of that program, you have to keep the historic features, including windows. Windows is usually a big part of the historic preservation component of those
right.
tax credits. So yeah, so the old windows are still there. They for good and for bad, they definitely have their some of their issues keeping those type of old single pane windows. So yeah. So and then on the ground floor, we have a barber shop and bar. They're connected as kind of an interesting kind of business model. We have the warehouse loft shops, which have 5 or 6 different smaller food shops and retail shops on the ground floor, including some folks who have shops that are there who are also residents of the loft building. So this is the Perfection Bakery building. This was originally a Wonder Bread bakery. It'd been added. The original bakery was on the 15th Street side and expanded over to this section. This was prior, prior to the Shady Lady was also a number of office buildings on the ground floor. You had an artist who lived upstairs, a well-known artist in Sacramento who had a number of gallery showings in her work studio upstairs. So it's very, very R Street in terms of its art culture, but was redeveloped. This building and the other half of the building were redeveloped between 2004 and 2008. And there are now 11 condo lofts upstairs. And on the ground floor, a number of local businesses are here. And then we have our one nightlife music venue, which is the Ace of Spades, which has grown to be a kind of institution here in Sacramento in terms of finding small venue concerts rolling through some national names, and then a lot of local tours and regional tours will come through Ace of Spades. And it's one of the key locations in the city for nightlife. And so there are a number of very popular restaurants, bars, and then of course Ace of Spades here for music. So, but it's also a great example of the early kind of era of the redevelopment of R Street, which you saw a lot of early commercial retail uses being built on the corridor. And so we were very happy to see these type of developments come into the corridor at the beginning. But our real focus now is to see more of what's upstairs, which is more housing. So we're hoping to see more development occur over the next 10, 15 years that will help support these local businesses further. COVID's hit them pretty hard, and there's not as many people working in the downtown core as there used to be. So all working from home. And so we need to really focus our efforts on trying to get more people to live here to support these businesses and keep these type of developments profitable and successful.
Narrow corridor. I'm looking over there and over there, and we've got neighborhoods, right? Which neighborhoods are these? I'm not even sure.
So the capital area neighborhood is there. It's a smaller, kind of micro neighborhood. Although some people, the larger kind of neighborhood we call just downtown.
Okay.
To the south side neighborhood, at least in this section, the south side neighborhood, Newton Booth neighborhood as well. Those, depending on who you talk to, overlap a little bit. So, and then as you cross 16th Street here, you get into Midtown, Poverty Ridge neighborhoods. And again, the definition of what neighborhood you're in is really dependent on who you talk to. So.
Okay, but they're vibrant neighborhoods, right? And this has probably been a huge plus, seeing a redevelopment. And
yeah, in terms of amenities, this has made this neighborhood and this area that much richer and more culturally diverse and more livable, right? You have these great restaurants that are here, give you options to eat at night, whether you have your Friday night dates, or maybe you're taking some people out of town. You have places to go that are local. I like to say that the R Street corridor is really a real taste of what Sacramento is overall, right? You get a little bit of national retailers, you get a little bit of the local art culture here, and you get a little bit of the restaurant culture all in one place within 2 or 3, 4, 5 block area. So if you're taking somebody from out of town, you want to show them what Sacramento is all about, take them to our street corridor. You'll get everything that you need to know about Sacramento in one area.
Yeah, I see. Well, Todd, this is a new building here, right? And West Elm is I think a chain. I don't know if it's a national chain or it's a major business. And so, what happened here? What encouraged a brand new building in the middle of this?
Well, that's an interesting story, actually. This used to be what was called the Crystal Ice properties. This was an ice factory on this block, and then on the next block over. And it sat pretty much in disrepair for probably 30, 40 years. So the family and developer who owned this property had planned to build a high-rise office building here in the late 80s. And because of the community activism that was eventually won over at City Hall, and they created the R Street Corridor Plan, which was a much lower rise approach to developing the corridor. Those plans for the high-rise building went away because wasn't allowed to build a high-rise here. And so that developer basically said, I'm going to sit on this property and let it just sit here and be what it is for however long I feel. And so it did. It sat here for a good 20 years before that developer decided to sell the property to Mark Friedman, who's a well-known developer in the downtown core, had done a number of great developments here around the city of Sacramento. And he partnered with his developer collaborator on other projects, Mike Heller, to try to re-envision this property. And they had visioned a mixed-use development here and tried to reutilize the existing buildings that sat on this property. And so that plan was developed, and they were going to move forward with it. And then during demolition one night, the whole thing caught on fire and burned to the ground. So it was very unfortunate. They had plans to start construction a month or two after that event occurred. So they had to go back on this particular site and start from scratch. But there were some good things that came out of it. They were able to put parking in here, make the building more efficient, create a really attractive design here with steel and a wood building that you can see from the outside. The big
still
wood
has the
trusses and
warehousey
everything.
kind of look.
Yeah,
to it.
very very industrial chic kind of look. Kind of replicated some docks here, and so what was an unfortunate occurrence and a great previous plan to develop the site. You have something new, creative, and exciting. And there have been a great number of mix of uses that have been put in here between West Elm. There's a brewery in the back, a number of restaurants and other retail uses here. Now on the backside here, on the other block down the street, there was also a crystallized property. There's a mixed-use residential building. It has 142 or so apartments, and then on the ground floor, there's retail there as well. And then Mike Heller ended up buying another property across the street from that, which was an old warehouse building that used to be previously a pesticide supply company. And so they did a really interesting job with the architecture there. They kept the one wall of the exterior of the building facing our street and built around that, and so they used that as an exterior facade for the project, and they built 3 separate buildings behind it to kind of keep that industrial flavor and a call back to the historic corridor with the interesting brick facade.
Okay, one quick question. When we were talking off camera, it seems like downtown Sacramento has suffered a lot, the businesses, because of COVID, and a lot of those businesses have not come back. But in Midtown, which has a lot of neighborhoods around it, there are a lot of restaurants. It seems you can't even find parking on, middle of the week, right? So,
Sure.
so the key is the fact that there was a housing element in Midtown, right? So there are people to frequent the businesses, where downtown you just don't have the foot traffic. Is that
Yeah,
a right?
it's a central business district, right? It
Right.
doesn't have housing because it's mostly offices. So for, and my personal opinion, if you want to see the downtown business area come back to life with more akin to what it was, 5 years ago before COVID, we need more housing down there. We need more people in the central city to support those businesses full time. So I think that's going to be a big push for the city of Sacramento over the next decade or two, is to really try to push for more housing in the downtown core.
What you're thinking here along our street is we need housing so that we have a permanent source of customers, right?
Yeah, and that initial phase of commercial development on the corridor has now changed over into housing now. So we are seeing more housing, starting with the Warehouse Artist Lofts, and then to the Ice Blocks building here, which, again, 140 plus units. A little bit further to the east, there were a number, probably, I think it's close to 400 units of housing were built just a block or two over. We have a 136 unit building just on the next block here on S Street. Behind the Ice Blocks building on S Street, there's a 159 unit affordable housing mixed use building there, just about completed. Another 50 unit project down the street. And then close to where the Fox and Goose is, there's plans for 2 different projects, one on state property and one on private property, for 200 units each in those projects. So housing is occurring. It's coming, and I just think if the economics hold here in Sacramento, in the downtown core for development, we'll see even more of it in the next 5 to 10 years.
And there's a Safeway there, so there's shopping. You don't even have to drive anywhere.
Yeah, and that was a great catalyst project too. Finished in 2004 as one of the first commercial projects built on the R Street corridor, and the first full service grocery store built in the central city in over 50 years. And it has been one of the key components of the revival, I think, of Midtown, the R Street corridor, because it's important. We were in a food desert otherwise. And so having a full service grocery store available to residents has been hugely important. We've seen a couple of smaller grocery stores open to even service even more of and cater to more of the residents.
Yeah, you don't have to drive 15, 20 miles to go grocery shopping.
Exactly, you can walk,
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
so
great.
good. Okay, Todd, well, we're on the Ice Blocks. So could you point out what we're looking at behind here?
Yeah, so this is the Ice House portion of the Ice Blocks. This has, I believe, 142, 146 units of housing, and then ground floor retail. So there are 3 separate buildings here. There's a 2-story commercial building here. Heller Pacific, Mike Heller, has done a great job of bringing really retailers who are kind of at the forefront of commercial retail right now, kind of the popular retail brands, and brought them back to the downtown core. We lost a lot of those in about 20 years ago as the downtown Plaza Mall kind of declined. We were losing a lot of retailers in downtown. And this development has brought a lot of those kind of more popular brands back to the central city. So this has been a really important development. It shows that urban retail can work still in the city of Sacramento if designed correctly and done in the right manner in the right place. So we have, West Elm, we have Salt and Straw down the way,
Shake
Bonobos,
Shack.
Shake Shack, Mendocino Farms, all very
Yeah.
popular food brands and all doing very, very well in their locations here. So.
Yeah, and I see things are picking up. When we started, this isn't really a morning place, and we started in the morning, and now it's started. It seems like late afternoon, evening, things probably get really busy here, right?
Yeah, in the afternoons at lunchtime gets very busy at this location. You do tend to see a lot of foot traffic here because of the Safeway grocery store that's just on the next block, and partly because we also have 16th Street Light Rail Station, another block in the opposite direction. 16th Street Light Rail Station is the busiest station in the regional transit system, and so it's a very transitory development. This is exactly what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be busy. It's supposed to keep people, getting them to and from destinations like Safeways, like restaurants and shops and stuff. So another great example, not only of a walkable pedestrian area that has a mix of uses, but also transit oriented as well.
Well, I've got one last question, and we thank you so much for all your time. Um, where are we going from here? What are the next projects on the books? You've mentioned the housing that you've been trying to develop, but are there any big plans for the corridor, or is it just kind of pushing a few more projects here and there?
Yeah, I think housing. That's still the biggest thing. The original corridor plan envisioned 2,800 units of housing. I think we're maybe at eight or 900 at this point. So, there's still a long ways to go. People always ask, "Oh, our street's so developed; it looks so great." I was like, "We're only halfway there, though." That's the wonderful part. It's like we've laid some groundwork, we've got a lot of development, but there's so much more to come. Probably in the next 10 years, I would envision there'll probably be another 1,000 units of housing built along the stretch of our street from 3rd to 29th Street. And so all that housing is very much needed in this area, in the central city, and specifically for the health of the corridor moving forward into the future.